What time is it? Listen, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Good Anime Palette Podcast. This is episode number 93. I am your co-host, Jason, and hearing my dumbass rants about my workplace problems and hearing his workplace difficulties and issues is my co-host and confidant, Will. What's up, buddy?
Howdy. Yeah, you definitely ran me through the ringer in terms of the things you have to deal with at work. A pretty eventful 3 weeks.
But we're being vague here. Nothing special was said. I mean, it happens at every workplace.
No, yeah, we're talking standard like issues that you face at work in terms of like, you know, especially someone as a new joiner. I mean, it's only been 3 weeks for you, less than a month, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you haven't known, or you haven't been really caring to listen for the last couple of months, both Jason and I have had career transitions or like new career paths. So, yeah, that's why things have been a little bit hectic on our side in terms of like the back end of GAP, planning things out for the upcoming weeks, months, even seasons. Usually before, when we had much more lax schedules, we would have already had stuff planned like a year ahead of time. Now we're kind of just scrambling to see what we actually get coming in for the first couple of episodes for the next season. But don't worry, everything is very much under control. I mean, the fact that we're recording right now,
this is fine, right?
Yeah, this is good.
The room is not on fire, right?
I don't see fire,
right? Because it is invisible.
Yes,
but
that's actually terrible. If you, I mean, that's carbon monoxide.
Carbon monoxide, yeah, and then we just randomly start fainting for no reason. Yeah, that's bad. But anyways, what's up, everybody? This time we are going to talk about something that is a bit more on the technical front, even though obviously it has to do with anime, manga, and all that. This is more of like the behind-the-scenes industry kind of facet that I think a lot of people, including ourselves, Will and I, don't really necessarily think about all that much, but it's definitely very integral towards the production or the completion of the things that we know and love, anime, manga, so on and so forth. And we have received a lot of feedback, whether it's from friends who listen to our podcast or just in general due to the analytics, that a lot of these behind-the-scenes kind of industry stuff does get quite a lot of attention. And I think this one, especially given recent events, is very, very relevant. So we will be talking about animation studios and their IP handovers. Will, what do you think of this topic?
Yeah, let's first break down what an IP is. So that way the audience can actually understand, because most of the time whenever we talk about behind the scenes stuff, there's a lot of business terms, technical terms, non-layman stuff. So we'll try and sort of, break it down so it's a little bit easier to understand, and so it's not so dry and boring. A lot of times the behind the scenes stuff can be pretty nitty gritty and dry. We understand that, but the fact that people still tune in and listen, and whether they tell us online or offline that this is the kind of content they want, we'll do the best we can to be able to wrap everything up so that you can at least understand it in a more entertaining format. So, Jason, this is your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
What the fuck is an IP?
So, IP is a term that you probably have heard, an acronym that you've heard thrown around, especially if you think about like video games and all of these entertainment mediums. IP, again, if you know all this already, awesome. Maybe this is a refresher for you. For people who don't know, which would be, I assume, a decent amount of people, let's get into it. IP stands for intellectual property. So when we try to talk about intellectual property, I found a very good organization, WIPO.
Yep, the World Intellectual Property Organization, which I'm very, very familiar with, because that's also part of the work that I do, too.
Like, is it like a big organization? Because I just Googled it. I don't really know too much about the organization.
So in terms of handling patents, publications, articles, erratums, and stuff, you'll have like specific country jurisdictions. So you might be filing a patent that's based in the U.S. You might be filing for something that is in Asia, like specifically like China, Thailand, Singapore, Hong Kong. It could be over in the EU. So you could be filing something in France, Germany, Great Britain. But WIPO, what they do as well is, to my understanding, is if you're filing a patent that goes beyond just filing something within your country jurisdiction, then they would also be involved in terms of getting your patents filed in multiple locations outside of your jurisdiction.
Right. So then, because you have patent in one location or
like,
one country.
You could look up, like, for example, like I use a bunch of different APIs to.
And what's API? Just so that people are aware.
This is like all the computer science stuff. So it's an application programming interface for ways of one or two different, or even more programs to be able to communicate with each other.
Right.
So in this instance, an API that I'm using essentially collates data for patents, whether it's like publication numbers, file numbers, issuing dates, grant dates, their relevant IDs, so like the publication numbers and whatnot, the titles, the authors that are tied to it.
Right.
What that API does is provide all that information, and then I have to essentially build a program to communicate with that to essentially extract and import that data for my usage, which is to then present to our relevant departments to be able to look at, okay, this is an IP that we're looking at. Who are the authors? How many citations does this thing have?
Are we infringing on it? What is the nature of the patent?
Is it even valid anymore? Did the patent like
expire?
Right?
Does it become generic?
Sometimes maybe it's unknown because it's so old. Like you have patents that are all the way back in the 60s, 70s, which you might not have data because APIs like this only came up in the last 5-10 years.
And you can definitely search for them. They're publicly available. For example, Google patents. Even though people say like, oh, Google is not an academic source, their patents provide the database of all of this. So, WIPO, going back to that, they define intellectual property as the creation of the mind, such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs and symbols, names and images used in commerce. Now, when you hear about intellectual properties, you might have heard certain words that are called copyright, trademarks, infringement, things like that. These are all related at the bottom to IPs. And the IP is protected in law by things like the patents, as we mentioned, copyrights and trademarks, which you probably have heard of before, and enables people to earn recognition or financial benefit from which they invent or create. And by striking the right balance between the interests of innovation and the wider public interest, the IP system aims to foster an environment in which creativity and innovation can flourish, according to WIPO. Now, this is a word-for-word definition, so it's very dry, right? But it's essentially an idea, a piece of work that is owned by the creator.
Or like, a collective that represents that creator in order to be able to, one, protect that idea, but also financially and, just commercially benefit from it.
Right. Now, what does IP handover mean? It is simply, this is my loose definition. It is simply the process in which an intellectual property changes ownership from one entity to another. So this could be from a person to another person, a person to an organization, organization to organization. Essentially, A to B, essentially, is what we're trying to say.
Yep.
And in addition, for this episode, so a lot of people who know a lot about intellectual property and copyright and trademarks, we will be less focusing on, we're also considering a change in adapting the anime and manga as an IP handover.
Yeah, we're not going to be going straight into business terms and talk about like hostile takeovers or like mergers and acquisitions and stuff like that. We're not going into like full white collar
nerdy lawyer.
No, we're not doing any of that.
Civil court.
We're trying to still pertain this to the world of anime. So in this specific context, there might be a few more broader terms that we're going to be using, but essentially when one studio was known to be producing an anime and then either after a season or two it then shut down and then the property was moved to a different one, or, which we've been seeing more recently, an anime studio does one season. The next season's done by another studio. The third season and beyond are done by different studios. It's not always the case of MAPPA just doing everything, Madhouse doing everything, A1 doing everything. There are going to be times when a property, whether it's a OVA, ONA, anime, whether it's a short, can actually transition from one studio to another.
That also includes anything from like live action of the same IP with the animation of the same IP.
Yeah. This doesn't happen nearly as often within manga, simply because of the fact that with manga, you kind of have like the root source, which is the mangaka, the creator, and they do get their contracts written up with a specific publishing house, though I'm sure that there are like some handovers that do happen behind the scenes.
Yeah, usually it's when a manga publication or magazine shuts down. But actually, sort of the more interesting part that we would be focusing on is when a light novel adaptation and the manga adaptation are from different companies. Because I think that is the more interesting part. But to go off of that, if we talk about licensing and all that, you might have remembered one of our more popular episodes, AD 13, After Dark 13, where we talk about production committees. Licensing is all about the name of the game. And to give you a definition by Anime News Network, a license is a legal document in which the licensor grants the license certain rights and privileges. Licenses are often have a specific term during which they are in effect, and they expire at the end of that term. So when you think of licenses, probably the most ones that are very common towards a lot of people's minds is licensing of their anime on like a streaming service like Netflix. That's why
distribution.
Yes. That's why, for example, Netflix will have certain shows that they kind of spin it down. It's like, hey, it's going to leave Netflix, so watch it before it disappears. It's because their license expired. So either they could renew it or they just couldn't negotiate it out.
Yep.
So, okay. Now, we got all of that stuff.
There are going to be a few things that, unfortunately, we're not going to be covering simply because either we're not super knowledgeable about it or the breadth of it means that we're not able to completely talk about it within the span of this episode.
Yeah.
So,
because at the end of the day, Will and I are not professional, like legal experts in patents and copyright material, nor are we insiders in the industry. We're just two dudes, right?
Yep. So we're going to state a few things. Yep. Should be no surprise. A lot of animation studios do not actually own any rights to the IP. Usually this is kind of distributed through the production company. So they essentially would come together and decide which studio would be the one that would helm this project. More often than not, it's usually the biggest bidder or like the majority stakeholder in the production committee. And that company itself probably has a studio in mind, aka a company that works under them, so they'd be able to just hand it over and give it to them.
Exactly.
Right.
Also, going off of that, the original creator of, let's say, a manga doesn't necessarily hold the rights to the IP. It usually is like the publisher, like Shueisha.
Yeah.
They, of course, have rights as a creator, and they probably get royalties.
Yeah.
But they do not technically, in terms of the legality of it, the rights are usually reserved for the organization that houses or, publishes the author's original works. So in this case, handover between formats such as light novels to manga to anime, or between platforms like from Shonen Jump to Jump Plus, Manga Plus, or like J Novel Club, are more about licensing than it is about like what we just discussed. Yeah, exactly.
So we could talk about it, but that's not the primary focus of today.
Yeah, we won't be talking about anything to do with copyright infringement or fan-made material such as doujinshis, because it's just too much to cover, and it is too ambiguous, I think, for us to really latch down on any particular point. And as we said, in industry insiders, you got to cut us some slack because we're not.
Yeah, we don't have the inside scoop. We're merely here as fans, as speculators, and we're running off of publicly available information. We're not going and digging up bones in someone's closet and trying to expose anybody here.
Yeah. So
we're not an investigative podcast. We're just two dudes talking about anime.
I mean, we try to be as scientific and as investigative as possible, but we're not journalists, first and foremost. So now that we kind of laid the groundwork, explain what all these definitions are and sort of what this episode will cover, you might be like, why would people ever do this handover business, right? Like, why is this even necessary to begin with? And if you think about it, it actually happens way more often than you might realize. Or you might not even think about it because you're just like, oh, it's just a season 2 or season 3 of the anime, so what gives? Who cares?
One thing that we talked about in our anime iceberg in a previous episode was talking about Studio Manglobe and how they were handling a bunch of different IPs until they ran out of money and filed for bankruptcy. Now, that happened all the way back in the mid to late 2000s. But
right.
Lo and behold, there actually are a lot of other studios that are also either shutting down or giving up their property rights because of the fact that they just cannot afford to continue working on that property anymore. So when it comes to budgetary issues, production issues, it's just the most straightforward one is company just has no money anymore.
Right. What was that? Going off of that iceberg thing, what was that? BL series? That
10
oh shit, I forgot. It's like Lucky 10 or something, right? It was basically to you should listen to
10 count.
10 count. You should listen to our episode of our Anime Iceberg. It was great. But basically, long story short, this BL series is phenomenally rated, has like a lot of critical acclaim, but one way or another, due to production issues, it fell apart.
Yeah, just like a TLDR, anime got announced in 2020, but because of COVID and behind-the-scenes production issues, it dragged on for 4 years, with the company and the production committee also saying, we're going to re-strategize. It's not going to be an anime anymore. It's going to be a movie. These are the people that are going to be voice acting. It's going to be directors. And then 2024, January, literally beginning of this year, committee said, we're shutting this down.
Right.
Just because, who knows? The easiest one to confer from it is to infer from it, they ran out of money.
Right, exactly. And then they just cannot keep up. The other thing that we also want to say is that sometimes it might not be due to bad blood or incompetence. It could just be, hey, I am, studio animation Jason, and I was doing season 1 and 2. Will, you are production committee. You want me to do season 3. And I'm like, yeah, I would love to. I have too many projects on my hands, so you're going to have to wait maybe like a year. And you're like, nah, I can't wait that long.
No, we have a track record, man. The first 2 seasons came out back-to-back years, right? So we have season 1 come out in 2023. This one just came out in winter 2024. We need to have something ready for 2025.
Oh, I mean, I understand that the property you're talking about, the manga is about to wrap up, right? But hey, I just have too much on my plate. So you're just going to have to shop around elsewhere.
Yeah.
No hard feelings. And that happens quite a bit. I mean, also, they might, as Will said, they might lack the resources to adapt the IP, whether it is, for example, a very good example nowadays is Marvel. And back in the day, before Marvel movies was a thing, Marvel Studios was a thing, they sold off their IP rights.
Yeah.
Marvel
was hemorrhaging money with their movies. Thank fuck that they had Sony to save their ass with the 3 Spider-Man movies,
right?
And I think was it Sony that also did X-Men as well?
No, 20th Century Fox.
Yeah.
So they gave like some to like each different company,
and they did fairly well.
Yep. And
Spider-Man 1 and 2 are still fucking amazing. X-Men 1 was great. X-Men 3 was shit.
I thought X-Men 3, the Dark Phoenix storyline was good, because I like the comic.
But Dark Phoenix, the movie itself,
was not good. Yeah. Let me be frank. Yeah. So those are examples. Another thing, hey, scheduling. That's going back off of production, budgetary issues. Scheduling is another factor to consider. The other thing also is reinvigoration of the original IP. I mean, in IRL movies, bringing things back to, for nostalgia purposes. But in anime, it's no different. Things like Trigun versus Studio Orange Trigun.
So when you have essentially reboots, right, then you'll have things like Urusei Yatsura, you'll have Shaman King, you just mentioned as well Trigun. There's also Spice and Wolf.
Right, back then and versus now. Also, was it Ranma Half?
Ranma Half is also coming out.
It's coming out
again.
in the fall.
What was it a different studio for Rurouni Kenshin as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. Well, either way, it's a remake of the original tale. So those things are what I would consider also IP handovers, because you essentially have that property and then you are essentially giving it to someone else to adapt it again, and with varying level degrees of success. So the other way, as Will mentioned, is when your company shuts down and you need to liquidate your assets because you need to claw your way out of debt, you can sell your IPs, and companies who think that they're worth it will buy it. So purchasing it through insolvency and bankruptcy is a very common thing.
Oh yeah, I had to confirm. So original Rurouni Kenshin back in 1996 was Studio Gallop and Studio Deen. And then the 2023 remake reboots was done by Leiden Films.
Yep. There you go. So then comes the more uglier side, which of why IP handovers happen, and that is disagreements between all the parties involved. Now, that could be, for example, when you hear a lot of creators leaving a project due to creative direction, a difference in opinion. That is code word in reading in between the lines of, I want to do it my way. You're telling me I can't. You're saying you have to do it your way, and we can't reach a compromise, so I'm out. The other thing also, conceptual disputes, Nothing can be proven until it's publicized. So there are some reasons why IP changed hands due to contractual negotiation problems and thus disagreements.
That happens a lot more than people see. And the reason why is because these are all very sensitive topics.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want all this thing to bleed into the public sphere because you don't want, first of all, if you're running as a business, you don't want people to find out any bad blood that's happening within the company, because that negativity can affect the way that people perceive your product.
Yep.
You don't want that kind of,
bad juju.
People always say, bad publicity is still publicity. Not in this case, right? You are legitimately, shitting in your food if you're doing this. Right? You're biting the hand that feeds you.
Because also, some people might sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, in which it's like, hey, as part of our arrangement, you can't really say anything about, like, as you said, oh, this was settled out of court. You might hear that all the time. That's because that they don't want this to kind of blow up into this thing. Because also, don't forget, let's say there's a bad blood, whether it's between a creator or a studio or a production company, you don't want this to kind of be your thing. And also, you don't want to make it so that other studios or other creators would be like, oh, wow, you caused this trouble? So why would I work with you if you just did that? So that's why everything is kept under wraps and it's rarely publicized. So when it does, that's when it's gotten to a certain level of severeness or shithousery, as we say, right?
Yeah. Then you have some more straightforward ones, which is, one is basically transforming an IP from one format to another, in one sense, from print to digital. So the most clear-cut example would be Chainsaw Man,
right?
And how it started off on Shonen Jump, and then it got moved into Jump Plus because of the growth of the platform, and wanting to basically get more eyes on it, and it did wonders. It actually was, really good for the Jump Plus Manga Plus platform, because now everybody can be able to read simulpubbed Chainsaw Man, which at the time, and probably is still now, one of the hottest properties.
Definitely. And going off of that, different web platforms like the Naru platform for web novels or Pixiv for web mangas, when you get picked up by a publisher, you then have to change your IP from that platform to a more quote-unquote official publication platform.
Clear example, One Punch Man.
Exactly, with one.
Yeah.
And
One started off, One Punch Man, all the way back in 2008, if I'm correct, probably. And then,
it's like weird sketches at the time, right?
It wasn't just so much weird sketches. It was just literally one guy just doing everything.
Well, we don't know if it's a guy. We assume it is, right?
One person,
right?
Yeah. We're not gonna try and figure out who they are. Keep that shit under wraps. So, and then afterwards, now it's like, okay, well, we need to get this up on a more regular schedule, and we also need to make this a little bit more polished, a little more refined, since we're going to be moving this onto our platform. How are you going to go about doing that? Are you going to hire a team? Are you going to, maybe we can provide some people to help support you and whatnot? That's also par for the course too. When you move in from something that's a bit more on like the semi-professional amateur level,
right,
and going into something that is a bit more professional.
Yeah, and that could also even be within their own platform. So, for example, Webtoons has their own, like, I guess, creators club kind of thing that is like amateurs. And then you can get upgraded to like on their lineup, so to speak. And then,
I think Webtoon essentially, like, sometimes they'll have like competitions every now and then to figure out who like the next artist they want to bring on. So they'll maybe give them like a one shot, and then they'll just let them to write a chapter, write an episode, and then whichever one does well, they'll pick them up and then get them signed on for much more stuff later down the road.
Jump Plus, Manga Plus had those like competitions, right? The mangaka one shots, and then those are kind of. Obviously, it's not exactly the same, but it's in essence, in concept, the same, of an amateurish with their own IP, people finding potential in it, so it gets handed over from maybe their own amateurish self-platform to a more official, well-established corporation platform.
In that sense, though, through a competition, who owns the IP?
You got to look at the contracts, man. Yeah. That's honestly how it is. Sometimes it's also devious, too, at that point, because maybe it's, it's one of the things. Do you read the terms of service? No, you go all the way down and it says, I agree. But then when you do, you're technically agreeing to all of the shit that you actually didn't read. And a lot of us, including myself, don't read when we probably should, right? The other thing that I also want to mention is a lot of proof of concepts versus official anime series adaptations. So, for example, I think a good one is Alice in Borderlands, even though the adaptation is more towards live action, but you have probably seen like Horimiya, for example. It was Hori-san and Miyamura-kun that was originally made as like a fan-ish project. And then over time, that was a proof of concept to show that, hey, this concept can work. And then people are like, oh, okay, we take notice now, it's getting a lot of buzz, so let's turn it into a really big official production by Cloverworks. Let's also get the manga done by Hero and have it, republish again. And things like that is like another way of how IPs are handed over. But in a way, it's more like it transitions into something a bit more official, a bit more larger scale. So that is sort of the ways that we would describe these kinds of IP handovers. And of course, I mean, spin-offs with OVAs and ONAs happen quite often as like a proof of concept, just to prove to the animation studios that who maybe didn't give them a first pass. They were just like, no, look at all this buzz. And they're like, okay, fine.
I mean, the biggest example would be Fate. In terms of having the original IP, yes, you can talk about how it started off horribly, and then of course,
or not horribly, depending on how you see it. But
and then Ufotable came in and saved the day. But I mean, in terms of like the spin-offs, like Hella Prisma, they also have Fate Extra, Apocrypha, they have Fate Strange Fake.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in terms of like the studios they have working on their spin-offs, they have Leidus, they had JC Staff, they have Shaft. Shaft did Fate Extra.
Okay.
A1 Pictures is doing Fate Strange Fake, which we still have no news on.
Still have no news on it other than episode 0.
Who did Fate Go? Fate Grand Order. Let me just look that up.
A1?
Could be.
I'm just guessing here. But even going off of that, right? If using Fate as an example, Fate Stay Night is originally
Cloverworks.
Yeah. Holy shit.
Yeah, see, there you go.
There you go. And although Cloverworks and A1 is related,
but that is also like another example of there's just too much on the plate, right? Like imagine if Ufotable was to do Fate Extra, Apocrypha, Strange Fake, Kala Prisma, even like the
Garden of Sinners?
Yeah. Well, Garden of Sinners was also that happened a little bit before they started doing Fate Zero and then a little bit of Blade Works and whatnot. But even then, like, imagine they did all that. There's just no way.
Oh, you're talking about Erima-kun, the cooking one.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's Emiya?
Emiya-kun and whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like, good luck trying to get Ufotable, who just disappears years on end and comes back with an amazing product, to get them to adapt all of that, right? And it's just more people getting involved to get pieces of the pie. And that's just the way it goes, because you want to keep the momentum alive. You want to keep the brand alive. But Fate Stay Night originally being a visual novel, right?
Yep. That was only in Japanese.
Exactly. So what happened? Again, we don't really want to go into fan translation stuff too much, but in this particular case, it was the fans that adapted it into English, and then through that, nowadays, it's like Tsukehime, I think a year or two ago, officially came out on the PS4. And it's a remake. They had Ufotable create an animation intro. All of this is stemmed from, I mean, don't forget, Crunchyroll also started by doing fan subs. So all of this kind of blew up because of fans' contribution to get the attention of the original people who hold the intellectual property rights. So these are all examples of why IP handovers are such a big deal, and why it is a very relevant topic then, a relevant topic now. So you might be wondering, okay, Jason, I hear you. I understand now why people do that. But is that like a thing? Maybe that's just a rare thing, right? Like a unicorn that just happens like once in a blue moon. I would argue no, actually. It actually happens way more often than you think, but less common than you might realize, which might be a cop-out answer, but that honestly is the best way to put it. Because bear in mind, a lot of anime adaptations, only have one season. And most of them, unless if it's massively popular or shown in action, that's all you're going to get. I mean, that's just the tried and true, saying of animes. Like, you're just going to get that one season and that's it.
And
right?
even if there is a series that does get sequels, it's not going to be guaranteed it's the same studio that does the sequel. Like, One Punch Man is a clear example of that. So we aren't trying to cop out and say that, like, it doesn't happen often, but it does happen often. You just don't see it. Like, there is literally no way for us to be able to predict whether a studio is going to be able to finish one thing from beginning to end, unless it was already detailed that they're going to be doing everything.
And even contracts can be broken. Agreements can be disagreed with later down the line. Things can happen. That changes things.
I mean, you have studios like, I think it was A1 that did Mashal, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and they came out and straight up said, we're adapting everything.
Which is like the ballsiest thing. You don't get Kanima's Citrus being like, yo,
Shield Hero.
You like Shield Hero Season 1, right? What about 2? Not really. But hey, too late. We did.
You said 3 is going to come out too.
Yeah, so 3 is going to come out. And I think it did all right?
It did better than the second season.
Yeah, it definitely did better than the second.
But even then, it's like you don't really hear people talking about Shield Hero nowadays. I think simply because it's just past its time now.
You don't talk about Season 4. No, I mean, there's going to be some people that does that. But, like, I don't think the zeitgeist, the general populace is like, yo, where's that Season 4, man, that we're so excited about? None of that.
Yeah, it is very hard to get manga serialized. It's even harder to get an anime that has one good season to actually get a sequel. Unless it's already been predetermined by metrics that, like, this is something that is going to be fantastic. So if you're not a Chainsaw Man, you're not a Demon Slayer, you're not a One Piece, you're not even as popular as One Punch Man is.
I mean, One Piece has an IP handover of sorts too with Wit Studio, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's no guarantee basically. But one thing I also want to mention is, okay, so things change. Handovers means a changing of the guards, a switch of the hands. That's always bad, right? Because I liked the original creation. Well, sometimes things just work out and actually it's a happy ending. I think taking Spice and Wolf as an example in this area is an extremely good example because Holo and Lawrence are the same VAs that are in the original Spice and Wolf back in the day. And yes, the animation has changed, but the director, series composer, storyboarder did not change.
Yeah, I think people have made mistakes in the past in terms of just completely cleaning house and bringing new people in to just try and, reinvigorate or just add new life into a series. And because of the fact that you're handling a property that can generate good commercial revenue for you, the last thing you want to do is completely shake everything up and see your fucking house tumble down because you just made way too many changes. So there has to be at least a little bit of consistency, whether it's the same director, the same VAs, maybe the same studio, whatever it may be. Just completely clean house and just bring in new figureheads to try and say, like, oh, don't worry, we're still making more of this stuff. It's not quite the same.
Yeah, because imagine you're a fan, right, of this show. You love the original production or the production back in the day. You would want, as a fan, to preserve the thing that you liked back then.
Yeah.
To be, presented today.
I mean, like, fuck, dude. Like, it was only like a couple months ago we went to McDonald's and had a Big Mac. And they, like, it wasn't just a Big Mac. It was the new Big Mac.
Yeah, oh my God.
And then we ate it. We're like, this is just a Big Mac before it sucked. That's it. It was just the same Big Mac sauce from, like, yesteryear. It was the same buns, the same patties. It's just, oh, remember when we made decent food? Here, this is what it tastes like. Now we're going to go back to our shitty Big Macs now.
Side note, Will, I don't know why, but, like, apparently in the past couple of months, now the Asia is all about the McGriddle?
Yeah, the McGriddle has made it over here, and everybody is lining up and getting that shit.
And bro, when I heard that, I was like, what do you mean? I was into that, like, years, like, decades ago, and now you're talking about, McGriddle's, like, this fucking new thing. I'm like, dude.
So they had a In-N-Out pop-up in Hong Kong.
Wait, really?
Pop-up for 3 days, or no, it's for 1 day.
Holy shit, I didn't know that.
They had a pop-up for 1 day, and all their burgers sold out by 10:30. He opened up at 9.
I've never had In-N-Out, so I mean, I've heard so much about it.
You gotta get over to California or go to Vegas. They have one there too.
So yeah, I gotta get into it. But Sonic is also pretty dope.
I've never had Sonic, but there's Sonics in California too.
So going back to IP handovers, now that we have given you all this spiel, is IP handovers a good or a bad thing? And
the answer is, we don't know, because it depends. It literally depends on how invested you are in a property, or how blasé and like impartial you are to something to begin with. If something you never really cared for changed studios, hey, that might give you more of a reason to give it a second chance. If you really loved this thing and then all of a sudden the studio changed, let's say you're a One Punch Man in 2010s.
Hey, do you like JC Staff doing One Punch Man? No? Then maybe switching studios is not a bad thing. There you go.
Yeah.
But, okay. So let's do point-counterpoint in terms of why it's a good or bad thing for IP handovers. The good thing? No monopoly on rights. Because exclusivity means that fans or others cannot do anything about the adaptation process. If you have to wait for which studio to make the last season of Attack on Titan, but they have too much on their hands or they're almost stretched too thin, you're just still going to have to wait it out, whether you like it or not. For example, Crunchyroll and Webtoons partnership is a very good example for a long-ass time. I mean, nowadays we got Tower of God Season 2, which I think is doing okay-ish. Not as good as Season 1, but Will and I like to dunk on Noblesse, as well as...
You dunk on it way more because you actually watched it.
Yeah, I fucking hate that show. And God of High School, which I have a soft spot for, but we didn't hear anything about Webtoons and Crunchyroll really that much anymore.
Until this year with Tower of God Season 2.
Yeah, and even then I would argue still not really utilizing the Webtoon partnership.
It's a shame because like around that time we actually did an episode talking about Webtoons and the future of adapting manhwas into anime, and fucking nothing has come out of it. It's been a very slow process. Yes, you do get some adaptations, but given the fact that at that time, like the juggernauts of Netflix coming together with Webtoon and making such a
you mean
big
Crunchyroll?
Crunchyroll, not Netflix. Crunchyroll and Webtoon coming together and saying like, yo, this is the joining of one great thing and another great thing, and we're going to give you more content. And then for 5 fucking years, there was nothing.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, Will and I kind of went off on like, hey, maybe don't adapt, because whether listeners believe it or not, God of High School, Noblesse, as well as Tower of God were hype Webtoons, phenomenally rated, dedicated followers of Webtoons. But if that's your first 3 properties out the door, and it kind of happened the way it did.
I mean, you said it too during the podcast as well. You were like, yo, these are this is your big 3. Your shonen, your manhwa big 3.
And you're doing it right from the beginning. You're not going to like test it out with maybe like a mid-tier series. Not to disparage those series, but like it's your first foray,
you
right?
You could have done like a 1-season Bastard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I would have loved to see Bastard.
Wait, what's the other one? Sweet Home?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Sweet Home got the live action.
What about the Challenger, right? Is that Challenger?
There were a lot. I mean, like they also just rolled out at the time a new one called Omnipotent.
Omniscient Reader.
Yeah, Omniscient Reader,
which has something coming up.
I mean, that was good at the time too.
No, they have an adaptation coming, I think, soon.
Yeah.
Ish. I think they announced it. But hey, listen. At the end of the day, it's still good that there's no monopoly on it. I mean, for example, Will said there's not a lot of...
Oh, no, I think the Breaker, not the Challenger.
Oh, the Breaker, yes.
That one's also super popular, too.
Yeah, but also just going off of that, things like Solo Leveling. I think Solo Leveling is Naver? Is it?
Yeah.
And then what's the other one? Leshin? Lezhin. It's one of those...
No, yeah,
it has like a picture of a fox. It's like red with like a white fox. Anyways, the point is, manhwa technically has adaptations coming in and out. It is the Webtoon and Crunchyroll partnership that is kind of bottlenecking a lot of the stuff that is on Webtoons. And who knows in terms of that contract and if it's expired or not. As we mentioned earlier, things can break down or it just end the term of their contract. So that might be a good thing because they can give it to someone else to make it big, right? The other thing, Will kind of had a Freudian slip about Netflix and Crunchyroll, but Netflix also has a lot of exclusive rights to a lot of shows.
Yep.
And whether you like it or not, you can't watch any of those shows unless if Netflix gives you permission or you watch it on our platform, which is probably what they're going to tell you. And
yeah, Netflix jail is still very much a thing.
Yeah. I mean, what was it? Like Komi Can't Communicate of like was like a staggering release. JoJo was a weird like release in batches.
It was a weird seasonal batched release that like every couple of months they would release like 12 episodes, 12 episodes, 12 episodes.
Of Stone Ocean, right?
Yeah. And I think they're going to continue doing that.
Yeah.
Which, okay, I understand that like you don't want to you wouldn't adapt all 39, 50 or however many episodes in one go. Completely understandable. But then to make people wait like that much and also like stagger the releases in such a weird format, that's why I didn't really bother watching much of Stone Ocean. I'd rather just read the manga.
Right. And I had the luxury because it was all released by the time I watched it.
But it all came out like 2 years prior, right? So
exactly.
Like that's like understandably a lot of things like a lot of ways that people might go about consuming something, because rather than waiting for episodes to release, I'll just wait 2 years. It's the same way for me. Like I'm not buying new games because I don't have time to play them, and I'd rather wait for them to go on sale.
Right.
Like for example, Legacy of Hogwarts Legacy.
I know of that game.
That one is now selling for 70% off.
I heard the Quidditch game apparently is getting a lot of traction.
I've been getting a lot of YouTube ads for that shit.
I mean, as someone that thinks Harry Potter is I mean, it doesn't really matter to me too much.
Not anymore for me either.
I mean, due to certain stances of certain people's opinions on certain things. But, okay, so we said that it's a good thing that there's no monopoly. Why is it a bad thing then?
It's simple. Let's say you just broke up out of a long-term relationship, but that girl was, or that guy was just the bee's knees.
It's not going to work out, man.
They're amazing, and you just long for something.
It's not you, it's me. It's not you, it's me.
But you had so many memories together. You had like 4 years, 4 years, 16 seasons together. It was just wonderful. It was magical. Why are you doing this to me? It's like, I'm sorry, but the time is just not right. I have to move on. I hope you move on with your life too. But you just can't ever get them out of your mind. So you decide maybe I can reconnect with another person and try and have those same memories. And then you find out, no, that person is a complete polar opposite. They're fucking insane, crazy, and they just did not add up to your expectations. That could happen with your favorite anime. That could actually, I mean, like that's happened way more often in the last 10 years. The biggest example that comes to mind that's not written on the docket right now would be Attack on Titan. For the first 3 seasons, it was done by Wood Studio, and then the handover over to Mappa.
Do you know why I didn't mention that?
Why?
Because not only because we will be talking about it later on in this episode, but because I feel like Mappa kind of did not deserve the backlash, quote-unquote backlash that it got.
But this is an example of it, where you have such a staunch fan base
that is true,
who loved the first. I mean, let's be real. The first 3 seasons of Attack on Titan, fucking amazing.
Dope.
The last couple of seasons, along with the final last part, season 2, 3, and the final season, blah blah blah, whatever it's called. Fuck that naming format. They were also really good too.
Oh, by the way, it's not over. There is a movie that's coming out in November.
I know. All right, like it's not done yet,
man.
Right?
The fuck, dude.
But that was also that's what people like kind of have issues with, where it's like one, the first thing they notice is the opening is a little bit weird. It's not really as. I mean, it's hard to with the first Mappa season that you're gonna have everybody on board, right? Not everybody liked the way that the art was done,
the 3D.
The 3D. I think like the amount of death threats that Mappa got from it as well was
that's
also
fucked up
insane,
too. By the way, yeah,
right? That's where the bad comes in, but not bad in terms of the handover itself.
Who
it's
was
the
the
reaction.
VA of Gabby?
Oh yes, she also. She did not deserve any
and
of
by
that.
the way, that is in what the VA went through is irregardless of Mappa, Wood Studio, Attack on Titan. She was just doing her fucking job, playing a character that rightfully is very hated for good reason, but not the voice actress herself. That's like Game of Thrones Joffrey level of hate. It's like, bro, have you thought about maybe the reason why they're hated is because they did a great ass job?
I think that role of Joffrey is legitimately one of only 2 acting credits that actors ever done. Granted, he started that role when he was super fucking young, and he did that shit for. I mean, how long was Game of Thrones? 10 years.
I
stopped
after
time.
I didn't finish it.
And at that point, it's like you've had such a big legacy, making one of the most hated, fictional characters of all time. You probably want to just set up shop. But at the same time, it's probably also due to the fact that like some people really hated his guts, and he could not separate the fiction from the reality. Just like in the Gabby Braun situation, you have a despicable fictional character, but the IRL voice actress had nothing to do with the atrocities that Gabby Braun was doing in Attack on Titan.
And furthermore, I thought she did a very good job in portraying that level of fucking
That's
hated.
the thing. If you hate someone that much, that character did its job.
Yeah. The actor that did Joffrey, have you thought about the reason why we all feel this vitriol and hatred towards Joffrey, King Joffrey, is because
they're a very well-written villain.
And also very well-acted character. But because people can't separate, truth from fiction, they just throw hate. But hey, look, maybe that's just a one-off, right? How about anime originals? Anime originals, they should not have that kind of problem, right?
It's the same property. It's just a different story. Hey, the director is different. Some of the staff are different. Hey, but it's still the same property.
Actually, I would argue it's even worse.
Yeah.
And this is why. Will and I love Psycho Pass a lot. And Psycho Pass Season 2 didn't have the same author, creator, director, despite almost a lot of other staff from Season 1 is retained. And there is, maybe you can argue that, hey, since Psycho Pass was an anime original, not retaining the same director, creator is not a big deal. Unfortunately, I would say an anime original, it is the biggest deal because that's the vision, right? Anime original, you don't have a source to rely upon. The source is the creator, the author, the director. So when the soul of Psycho Pass is theoretically removed in Season 2, you have no way to carry on that vision, or you have to guess, or maybe there's a consultant, or you get the creator to come back and be like, oh, here are some notes. And then you get the end of Game of Thrones, the last season, where George R. R. Martin's like, hey, this and this and this should happen. And then it all kind of went to shit. So in those cases, IP handovers are just horrendous because the creative juice that stemmed from the creator, the magic, is gone.
This is what I was mentioning about, completely cleaning house. Because not only was it like different directors, different staff, it was also a completely different studio too, right? It went from Production IG to Tatsunoko.
Yeah.
That was already like, we saw this shit happen. Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, did Psycho Pass 2 come out before or after One Punch Man 2? I think it came out before.
I mean, I can double check
but you can see, like, this is like legitimately history repeating itself, where if you just change everything, you're not going to have the same product. That sounds fucking like, no duh, like, of course it's going to be different. But that's not what the minds of a businessman or a production community would be. The thing for them is, hey, this property, this IP was making us bank. It was getting us recognition, commercially successful. We could change things up and people would still lap this shit up. No. And it's because fans are emotional creatures. Fans are always going to be trying to create and foster a relationship they have with whatever property they have, whether it is a good relationship or a bad relationship. And when things come up that stir the pot, a good relationship could sour, or a bad relationship could be like, yeah, I told you this shit is fucking awful. You called me a hater, now y'all haters too.
I mean, basically, when change happens, things will be different. For better or for worse, it will be different. Yep. But to clarify what Will asked me earlier, Psycho Pass Season 2 came out in fall of 2014, and One Punch Man Season 2 came... Are you asking about the two Season 2s, right?
Yeah.
One Punch Man Season 2 came out in spring of 2019.
Okay. So One Punch Man didn't learn anything then.
Yeah. Yeah. And Season 1 of One Punch Man was 2015 fall, and...
I forgot how old Psycho Pass is. I think Psycho Pass Season 1 is like over 10 years old now.
Yeah, but can you guess the
2012.
Very good. Yes. October 12th,
2012,
yeah. Yeah, and to March 22nd, 2013.
It ran as a double curve. Okay.
It ran as 22 episodes.
Nice.
So there you go.
So that's like a kind of brief example of when things work out in a handover and when things can go completely tits up terribly for like a handover, right? On one side, people just want a little bit of change. People just don't want to see the same companies doing the same things. A little bit of spice and variety would be nice. On the other side, too much change could really rock the boat and everybody loses out. Especially when you have something that's doing so well completely shattered because of just misdirection and mismanagement.
Or expectations, right?
And expectations too. But again, I think one thing that we've always mentioned is that fans are always going to be super passionate, but also super subjective about the things that they like.
Right.
No two anime fan is going to be the same, even if they do have the same mal entries, right? Like you're going to have people that have any disagreement on anything, whether it is a studio, or it is a director, a character. It could even be a plot line and or tropes. Like you're never going to have people have the same opinion. And so when you change things on a drastic level, which is to change the studio, which is to change the art direction, the director themselves, maybe even the music. The music itself is that was what.
Imagine if you don't have Sawano.
Yeah.
For AOT.
You say fuck right off.
What happened about Link Horizon when Link Horizon did the ED and not the OP of the final season? How many people got pissed off? Okay, sure, SIM. Look, hats off to you. You did fucking great.
For me, that one wasn't much of an issue for me. But I'm not that passionate fan who would find issue with it.
But you would believe me when there is a good sizable people like, where's Linked Horizon? Why is it an ED non-OP?
I mean, the fact that you had death threats after the 4th season, anything could fucking happen.
Yeah, right? I know, right? So I think we're getting close to our break, and after the break we will go over actual examples and we'll talk about actual studios and anime adaptations, whereas the first half right now we're just talking about more of the conceptual laying the groundworks. But overall, I think IP handovers is always just going to be a necessary thing in the industry of any entertainment.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of things that you just cannot account for, whether it is budgetary issues, it could be just disagreements in terms of vision, directorialship. It could be more unfortunate things like the passing of a director or a VA or even the mangaka.
Yeah, I mean, Bastard is Berserk. Sorry, not Bastard. Bastard was that Netflix show. Berserk is an interesting example, whereas it's not less about the IP. It's more about the creator changing, which in a way is sort of like a shifting of the IP, right? So things like that is always prevalent everywhere. So. Will, anything...
the only thing that doesn't change is that things change.
Yeah. Honestly, that's the best way to put it. So, Will, anything you want to say before we head off into our break?
No, I think that, you might be sitting tight and be thinking about, when are we actually going to be starting talking about some anime? Well, this is how, these kinds of more business-minded, business-sided episodes go. We want to lay out the foundations, the dry-ass foundations of why certain things happen within the anime industry, because it's a necessary thing to talk about, right? If you were to think that a good anime deserves to have the same director and the same animation studio, the same VAs, I don't believe you understand how contracts work.
Yeah.
I don't think you understand how passion and the drive to work in creative arts works. Just because you started off with something doesn't mean you're going to see it through to the end. And also, just because you put together a wonderful cast of characters, the voice actors who voice these characters, doesn't mean that they're always going to be the same.
And at the end of the day, also, I'm fairly certain that in all of these instances, almost everyone involved, for the most part, wants to do good by everyone. Whether it's themselves, the fans, or the property themselves, they want to just do good. They want to do good work. No one just, even when Will and I shit on random, anime studio for making, Tezuka Productions, we shit on it recently due to the Seinen and stuff. I can guarantee you that there are people at Tezuka Productions that are just good people doing the very competent work, just trying their best. There's no doubt in my mind. But when you look at it in terms of the end product, it just comes to show that things can still turn to shit.
Yeah, hardly ever is there a handover due to extreme negligence and incompetence. More often than not, it's just business.
Yeah, and it can go from random Manglobe shuttered back in the day to all the way to which studio just wanted to give it off due to circumstances. Ancient Magus' Bride is given off, and which studio's hey, listen, I don't really want to work on this AOT anymore for whatever reason. Here, Mappa, you take it. Yeah, even the cops are
or it could even just be like, yo, Mappa's got way more people, and we got a lot of stuff to do. Because congratulations on doing the first 90 chapters of the manga. We need to wrap this all up real fast.
I mean, I think that. I mean, the last thing I'll say is before we get into the break, you and we're speculating that Dan to Dan by Science Saru may not be like an ongoing thing. It could be, but we don't know. And would that be okay? Only time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, Dan not even out yet.
Exactly.
Right? We still have a few more weeks before.
Technically, there was a bit of an issue with that lately. But yes, Dan is not out yet.
At least as of recording.
Yes.
Yeah. Those are my final thoughts. When we come back, we'll be giving a few actual examples of IP handovers. We might even rate them and see like whether the move pulled off or whether we actually think, you also just stuck with what you had.
The first half of the episode has to hand it off to the second half of the episode. You feel me?
Yep. And now we're going to hand you over to the break. Catch you all later. Welcome back to the second half of episode 93, where we're talking about IP handovers in the world of anime and manga. Still Will, still Jason. This time, rather than talking about nitty-gritty business terms, we're actually going to be talking about anime and manga now. Finally, it took us an hour to actually talk about some anime. So let's get into it then. So, when we talked about like the IP handovers, Jason did mention that it's not just a one-off, one instance, one example. There actually is a wide spectrum of how IPs, properties, licenses can be handed over. So we're going to go over a couple of series, maybe even give like more background information about why certain series had handovers, or even just do pure speculation, because that's what fans do. We don't always have the secret sauce. So we do need to, throw in our 2 cents to be able to drive whatever narrative we're trying to push.
Plus, it's fun to speculate as long as we don't go too crazy, right?
Yeah. So the first one, which I think is the most obvious one, because we've been seeing a lot of them in the last 15 years, the remakes, as in the Brotherhood treatment.
Exactly. So, of course, we have to say, when we say the Brotherhood treatment, we have to mention where that came from. Full Metal Alchemist. Full Metal Alchemist OG. We'll just say, what we call it? We'll just call it the OG series versus...
OG versus Brotherhood.
Yeah. And, I think you watched both. I only watched Brotherhood. I read the manga.
I watched all of both.
So I read the manga, but I only watched Brotherhood. And I remember you asking, I asked you about it, and you said that at some point, the story, due to a lack of source material at the time, it just veered way off course, right?
Halfway through, it essentially like ran into an original story. Now, what was the interesting here is that when we talk about IP handovers, it was still done by Bones, both ways, right? What was the example of the handover? Was it in terms of like different stats, different voice actors? Where did things change? Because just from the outlook, it seems that for the most part, the voice actors were the same, except for the big one, the most popular character in Full Metal Alchemist, whether it's original
Mustang?
Roy Mustang.
Yeah.
So Roy Mustang in the original was voiced by a man named Toru Okawa, and then in the remake, the Brotherhood version, it was done by Shinichiro Miki.
Well, the reason why I mentioned this for IP handovers is actually less of an actual handover as much as a handover in spirit, if that makes sense, right? Because Full Metal Alchemist versus Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is two separate properties, if you will, right?
The staff are different too, right? They have different directors, they have different sound designers. Oh no, the sound director is the same, but they have different producers as well.
Right. So that's sort of the reason why. In fact, if anything, this and a few other examples that we're going to mention in this section is sort of the inspiration behind IP handovers and how it kind of started. And I felt that like just because of
it might not be like the best example of a handover, but it was definitely what handed the reins to other properties and other studios to do the same thing.
Exactly. And going off of that, I mean, let's look at another well-known shonen action, Hunter x Hunter and Hunter x Hunter 2011. I think people just call it 2011 versus
people
OG.
I mean, I still call it Hunter x Hunter. I still say Spy Family.
Yeah.
But again, it's up to you because there is an X there. So
I mean, in terms of like pronunciation or if you conclude the X or not is irrelevant towards the difference of the OG series versus the 2011 remake, which I would also equate it as almost a Brotherhood treatment, right?
So you do have a 12-year gap from the first Hunter x Hunter released in 1999, and then of course Hunter x Hunter 2011 was released in, guess what, 2011. Different studios though. So the first one was done by Nippon Animation. At the time when it was airing, at least if you're looking at scores that we have for my anime list, it's currently ranked at an 8.42 for the raw score, ranked 174 with 603,000 members, putting it at a 376 popularity.
Crazy
now,
good.
In comparison with the more contemporary version, 2011, 9.03 for the raw score.
Yo.
Ranked 8th, popularity 9th, with a membership of 2,900,000.
That's so fucking crazy.
So this is an instance of, again, something seeing that like the popularity it had before, but for one reason or another, maybe the visual quality was not good, maybe some story arcs were cut. I mean, we talked about the One Piece remake as well, right? The One Piece, and how it's going to be doing a lot of like the different storylines that were either cut out or just not done well.
Which, by the way, as of recording, we still don't know what Wit Studio is going to do yet. No new footage, no new news.
But it's Wit. Like, let them do whatever they want, man. Let them finish off Spy Family or whatever. So, yeah, not only do we have different scores, they're both really, really good. Originally done by Nippon Animation, and then now the contemporary one was done by Madhouse.
Look, whenever I see things like Nippon Animation, it just reminds me of like the Toei Animation. It reminds me of the Sunrise, like the old school, tried and true, long running.
These are like the big. I wouldn't say conglomerates. These are like the oligarchs of anime production in the 90s because there just weren't that many.
Yeah, and to be honest, I would also, and maybe this is a slight against these OGs, I would always feel like they're more factory churning. Whenever I think of that, I think of like Studio Pierrot back in the day of like, we need to have an episode every week. Let's need to have a filler here, filler there, that kind of thing. But I know that Hunter x Hunter 2011 is obviously, according to the stats and according to many people, way more well regarded than the OG series.
It's actually funny you say that it's a factory churner. So I actually looked in terms of how many things they have credited. Nippon Animation has 233 on my anime list. Madhouse actually has 389.
Okay.
But I think it was just a changing of the guard because during like the late 2000s to early 2010s, Madhouse was on another one. They were just making fucking everything.
Yes.
Every shonen under the fucking sun was under the Madhouse roof. And then, 2015, things just completely...
And then Redline.
Yeah, Redline happened. Well, I would hope Redline's not the only thing that caused it, even though, yes, it definitely contributed to the downfall of Madhouse. But hey, look, Orb's coming out. So
yeah, they're back. And hey, spoiler alert: Will and I will be doing an episode on Mappa and Madhouse. Okay, so Will, have you watched both? Hunter x Hunter?
I watched when I was younger. Okay, so when I was younger, I was definitely a massive One Piece, Bleach, Naruto fan.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had a friend. Granted, I went to international school.
Yeah.
So, yes, I did have Japanese friends. And one of them was like, you're watching all these, but you're not watching Hunter x Hunter? What's wrong with you? Like, you can't call yourself an anime fan if you haven't watched Hunter x Hunter. I'm like, oh, okay. When I was my 11-year-old self was like, oh, I guess I'll go and watch some Hunter x Hunter. Managed to find it, watched it, did not like it. But I think it was just...
Is that the OG, right?
Well, I don't think it was so much because of the fact it was the OG. I mean, granted, anime quality back then was not great either.
But it was the OG, not
OG.
the,
Yeah, of course.
okay,
Yeah, I didn't watch. I mean, like I would have been.
Don't date yourself, but I understand.
I would have been 22.
Okay,
by the
there
time,
you go.
The
2011
remake came out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the original came out like 1989. I watched it like in the early 2000s. I don't think I hated it because I didn't like the animation quality. I just didn't like it because I was already watching Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach. And those are already so good.
They were good.
It's like the fan debate of you love something so much, therefore you're going to have everything else be secondary.
Right.
That's just how it was.
And back then, when these shonen actions are just so long running, you have to be committed, right? So it's just the way it goes when you have that much time on your hands versus the amount of stuff that you need to watch.
Exactly. So,
for what it's worth, I only read Hunter x Hunter, and I stopped quite early on in the grand scheme of things.
yeah.
But
Now, then fast forward 12 years with the new Hunter x Hunter. When I say new, it's like it's crazy to say that even though it came out like over 13 years ago.
yeah,
Spoiler alert, if anybody has been looking on X/Twitter, we're going to be getting some more manga soon for Hunter x Hunter.
yeah.
Hopefully.
And then he's gonna retire again. I don't know.
Yeah. I've been talking to a few of my friends about it, and they're like, I'm just waiting for the next chapter. And the guy's like, Sensei's working on it. Don't worry. He's got something coming up. And I'm like, I've been burned before for the last 6 years.
Also, you've been burned 3 times in succession, in really quick succession, by the way. So, okay, fine.
Yeah.
For me, I'm of the stance of, bro, you did good already. I respect you trying to get back into the game, but just chill with your Sailor Moon creator wife and just chill. That's my stance. But hey, I'm not them. I'm not in their shoes.
But back on like the sort of handover of not just studios but like just different decades, right? We skipped a whole decade, right? The 2000s, nothing happened, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you had Hunter x Hunter, but like, that shit came out in 1999.
Yep.
And then fast forward 12 years later, I think this was a fantastic move. It worked out because I think that everybody that was attached to the IP, whether as a business, as a fan, as a creator, it was a long time waiting to be able to get anything out of Hunter x Hunter.
It was like a defibrillator, like kickstart the heart again, right?
Is there life in this series that, at least in print form, was still pretty popular? But you know how like anime works, right? If it's on the screen, it's going to
better.
It's going to pump up those numbers, man.
Yeah, in quotes, it's better. Yeah.
Yeah. So now that you have this instance of like success, right? We move on to another instance of success, which has been a little bit under the radar, simply because these properties are still kind of old. But Hellsing,
one of my top 10 most favorite anime of all time is Hellsing Ultimate, not Hellsing, although I really do like Hellsing as well. So, Hellsing, created by Studio Gonzo. You might have heard that name every once in a while back in the day. Fall 2011. And has a series.
Oh, no, not 2011.
2001. Sorry,
Yeah.
I saw. Oh my god, I took off my fucking glasses.
.com early era. Yeah.
My bad.
That's October 11, 2001.
Yeah.
Studio Gonzo, correct though. That was correct.
13 episodes, 7.49, rank 1933, popularity 278 with 740K members.
Yeah. So the popularity is definitely up there. Right, the
yeah.
raw score could be better, but I think this. Remember, Mal did not exist in 2001.
Yeah, I always considered Hellsing, the OG Hellsing, as like the same time frame as Trigun for some reason, because that's when I bought the DVD for both.
I think the art style for sure.
Yeah, it's also very reminiscent. But
this was also around the time when I was watching Blood Plus.
Yes.
And
Or like Blood the Last Vampire.
Yeah, and that's why, like, yes, Hellsing was out, but I fucking love Blood, so I'm going to watch that instead. He goes, oh my god, Blood plus the OP is still, like, one of my favorites of all time.
I was more of a Hellsing person. So, surprise, surprise, after that series, I was like, oh man, that was pretty dope. But then that was it, right? And then in 2006 until 2012, for 6 whole years, 10 episodes came out called Hellsing Ultimate. And 10 episodes gave you a mouse score of 8.35, ranked 222, popularity 180, and members of 949,000. And done by Studio Madhouse and Satellite Graphinica, right? Graphinica, yeah.
Yeah.
My God, the difference of Madhouse when making Hellsing Ultimate versus OG Hellsing is fucking insane to me.
What's actually also insane is when you were mentioning that it ran from 2006 to 2012, even though it only had 10 original net animation episodes. Yeah, you're not lying. This was the scheduled release of Hellsing Ultimate. The first episode came out in February 2006. I'm going by original release, not the English release. Then, 6 months later, in August 2006, we got Hellsing 2 for the Ultimate series. April 2007, February 2008, November 2008, July 2009, December 2009, July 2011, like fuck 2010.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know why.
And then February 2012, finally finishing on Boxing Day, December 26, 2012. The English release did not even come out until 2014 for the final episode.
Yeah.
One of the weirdest staggered... Can you even call it a staggered release?
No.
What the hell release schedule is this? But it's also like... It's probably because, as an OVA/ONA, you just didn't
Well,
have...
it wasn't an ONA. It was an OVA.
OVA, yeah. So you didn't have to stick by, like, a release schedule, like, per season.
Yeah, because when we say OVA, original video animation, it came out on DVD, and it will not be on broadcast. So every 6 months or so, obviously minus the 2010, you would just get a new DVD that shows up and being like, hey, it's the next one. It's the next one. It's the next one. And by the way, each of those episodes is double length. It's like 50 minutes.
Yep, 50 minutes.
So technically, if you go by the standard 20-something minutes per episode, it's basically 2 cours.
Now, that doesn't mean, of course, yes, I've just listed how much time there was in between each episode before it released. It wasn't all that swimming either.
Hell no.
So, this was just for Japan. So, for the US, it was released by Genion USA, with the first episode coming out on December 5th. Then, just a year later, Genion USA stopped self-distribution of the titles in 2007, but it remained the licensor for the series, with Funimation Entertainment taking over its North American distribution. Funimation released the 4th episode and re-released the first 3 episodes in September 2008. Then, 2010, Funimation announced they would license the first 3 of the new OVA episodes 5 and 7, as well as the original TV series, and in 2011 licensed episodes 1 through 4 plus 8, and that will be released in the USA starting in 2012. In 2014, Hellsing Ultimate then moved to Adult Swim's Toonami programming block starting September 13 of that year. However, there were difficulties securing broadcasting rights for the final 2 episodes, leading to the show initially to be pulled after episode 8, but the rights were eventually cleared up in time to be able to air episodes 9 and 10 later in December.
Then, Will, here's the other thing. You're going to hand it off to me. Funimation released all episodes on Blu-ray on June 4th, 2019. Then, the story's not over, Funimation and Crunchyroll merged, right? So what happens to Hellsing Ultimate? It was in limbo until 2022. So, like, when we talk about IP handovers, Hellsing is very much like licensing IP hell.
The whole licensing debacle ran legitimately over 2 decades.
It's insane, bro. Like, that's why I also thought, like, we have to talk about Hellsing when we talk about IP handovers, because it's just like all of what we talked about, almost everything condensed into one property's existence.
Like, during that time, we had the major financial crisis of 2008, the first black president in Barack Obama. We had the first Asian and African host cities for the World Cup. We had COVID, and we still haven't finished licensing issues with fucking Hellsing and Hellsing Ultimate.
Yeah, and now, in theory, it's okay for years to come.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've watched everything, right?
Yeah.
So have you. But
Yeah.
It took a long fucking time to get here.
Yeah, and it's funny that after everything was all made and released, it still wasn't over in terms of the issues and the handovers and the licensing, right?
Do you think that might be the reason why neither entry, both Hellsing and Hellsing Ultimate, broke a million members on my anime list? Do you think it's just because of how staggered things were, and also the fact that, yes, a lot of people probably only started watching this in the late 2010s, but it first released in 2006.
I think the Hellsing Ultimate, the fact that it's already that high of a score, when things like Twilight, when things like Constantine and all these other similar, like Blade and everything, was all done after the fact.
Did you mention Van Helsing as well?
No, but yes.
Yeah, another vampire
but yes,
hunting.
isn't that the Hugh Jackman one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So and also don't forget video games too as well. There's definitely like a Van Helsing video game too, and or like other vampire video games. So I think it kind of lost its shine in terms of the trend of vampires and vampire hunters.
I remember why I liked Van Helsing, even though the movie was kind of okay.
Why? Was there a hot lady?
It was Kate Beckinsale.
There you go. She then went into the underworld and made her stamp on this.
I love Underworld. Oh my god.
I mean, I like Kate Beckinsale.
I love Kate Beckinsale.
I think Underworld is very good guilty pleasure trash and slop, but it's all about Kate Beckinsale. But yeah, I mean, Hellsing, let's go from the depths of despair to crying depths of despair.
Dude, I think if we're talking about emotional trauma, I think that you can't look past Fruits Basket.
Yeah, and I think Fruits Basket is one of those IP handovers that is so massive of a change. I mean, when you look at the original shoujo manga that has like the cover of like for people who are unaware, if you Google image like the original Fruits Basket manga, their layout is very reminiscent of like a certain publisher and their shoujo series. It's like white background with like two rectangles, and it's very clear of it's a shoujo series.
It's Hana to Yume, like that. Legitimately, like Yuna of the Dawn, Yuna of the Dawn, Skip Beats, Love So Life, Fruits Basket.
I think the Rose of Bersalis or something. I forgot the name of it.
All of them, it's red title,
Yep.
white background, central character, border.
Exactly. And all of those are shoujos, by the way. So for some reason, that format, whenever I see that, it's like, oh, that's old school shoujo.
Of the 90s and 2000s, I think like more contemporary, it's changed a little bit now.
Oh yeah, definitely the aesthetics.
But you know when you see this format, you're like, it's Hana to Yume.
Yeah, it's old school shoujo, right?
Yeah. And if we're talking old school, again, running with the theme of the late 90s and early 2000s, original Fruit Basket came out summer 2001 by Studio Deen. Oh, by the way, we forgot to mention as well, the Hellsing Ultimate shit was also done by Madhouse. Madhouse is going to be central to this conversation.
Yes, Madhouse and Graphinica, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so just to be clear, Fruits Basket was not done by Madhouse.
No, it's not.
No. But it was done by Studio Deen originally in 2001, ranked 1,269 with a popularity of 7.969, membership 546,000.
Wait, what was the score? Raw score?
7.69.
Okay.
The first season of the new Fruits Basket, which came out, actually the most new of the ones we've been talking so far, because this one only came out 2019, which, okay, it was still 5 years ago, but for me, it felt like yesterday.
Yes, it did.
Okay?
Yes, it did.
Because you factor in COVID math,
yes,
right?
exactly,
You know?
yeah.
Right? So
it's like girl math, but COVID, yeah.
Yeah. 8.21 for the first season of the remake. Popularity, 213. Membership, 857,000. And the scores just keep going up and up and up.
Wait, what is the final? I need to remember. Is it like rank 13 or something? It was rank 13 at some point, I remember.
Are we talking about in terms of its score?
Yes.
Okay, so just to sort of do it...
I'm talking about the final, though.
Yeah, doing it sequentially. So second season, 8.54. So it went from, in terms of ranking, 372 for the first season, 119 for the second season, 15 for the third season, for the final season.
Yo, dude.
And all 3 of those seasons of the new Fruits Basket was done by TMS Entertainment.
Yeah.
And that ran over 2 years. So spring actually was very consistent. Spring 2019, spring 2020, spring 2021.
And by the way, from the get-go, they were like, we're doing all of it. Shut the fuck up, guys. We're doing all of it. And guess what? I'm really glad they did.
Yeah. So this one actually was probably one of the biggest changes because with the previous ones, they still had like some of the same directors, some of the same VAs. This one seemed to be like a completely clean slate. So new studio, new voice actors, I think even new staff. The only one that I see that is like pretty much consistent through all of these, by the way.
It's the creator, right?
Oh, well, there's, yeah. But also, like, the funniest one is the name that is most consistent with Fruits Basket, Hellsing Ultimate, as well as Hunter x Hunter, Justin Cook.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he worked as like a producer, voice actor for a lot of these shows. I think.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I recognize that name, and if you don't, like, you should, because veteran, definitely a veteran of the industry, for sure. I mean, going off of that, Spice and Wolf also, we mentioned that earlier. I think it's doing really good right now, and who knows, as of recording, it still hasn't finished its second cour, so maybe there will be a season 2 at the end when they announce it, just like a lot of productions do. But as it stands, I think it's doing relatively okay. I haven't really watched it. I haven't kept up with it, but not because I didn't want to, but I was just going to wait until all of it because I also watched the first 2 seasons back in the day, so I'm assuming they cover the same thing.
Yeah. So original Spice and Wolf came out in 2008, done by Imagine. Don't even know if that studio exists anymore. But the first season was an 8.22, ranked 353, popularity 227, membership of 833,000. Now you might be wondering, oh, well, I guess that's good, right? Imagine did pretty good. Well, Imagine doesn't really exist anymore. The last thing they did was Sweet Reincarnation in 2023, and the production they did before that was Spice and Wolf 2 back in 2009.
Damn.
Yeah.
Skeleton Crew, bro.
And here's the thing, too. Imagine worked as a primary studio for season 1 of original Spice and Wolf.
Mm-hmm.
It then changed over to Brainspace and Marvy Jack for Spice and Wolf 2. That studio, Imagine, became a producer. Nothing since then.
Yeah.
Then you fast forward 15 years later to go to Spice and Wolf Merchant Meets the Wise Wolf, done by, take a big guess who it is. If you guessed anybody but Passione, you're fucking wrong. It was fucking Passione. Nobody was like, this is right. This is normal. Good.
Yeah.
Even Jason and I are like, what the fuck?
No, they did Miroko-chan, right? They'll be fine, right?
What the fuck?
They did Higurashi, right? They'll be fine.
Yeah. So,
okay, to be fair, though, it sounds like they really did put all their eggs in one basket for Spice and Wolf, just like how Madhouse did with Fieren, and I think it paid off for them.
It paid off, but I think like the score's kind of dipped a little bit. It's 8.02 right now, which I remember it being a bit higher than that.
Yeah, it was like an 8.20 or something, like 19 or something.
But you know how these kinds of stories go, right? When it's a bit more sort of like adventure drama, like there's going to be lulls in the plot.
And I think when the season is over, then it would have a readjustment period, and then we will get more insight as to how everyone actually feels as a whole. Because don't forget, listeners, when it comes to my anime list in particular, a lot of people only rate it when they complete the series, which is also what I do personally.
Yep.
So you're going to hear a huge shift in scores at the end of every single season.
Yep. So they did manage to keep the majority of voice actors and actresses consistent. Like you mentioned, Hollow was still done by Ami Koshimizu. Kraft Lawrence, is still done by Jun Fukuyama. Nora Orent, I don't know how to pronounce that name, is still done by Mai Nakahara. There's a few different VAs and whatnot, but you still have that consistency.
Yeah, and also the production staff is the same as well.
And guess who's also a producer on this? Justin Cook.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hey.
Justin Cook is fucking busy, man.
Dude never leaves, man. Dude hustles, bro. So, let's talk about another one that I mentioned a lot.
This one is probably mostly you because you are a big Hori to the Miya fan.
Yes. So Horimiya has actually IP transfers for both the manga and the anime.
Which is interesting because I mentioned that manga transfers don't happen very often, and here we have a case example of a actual IP handover within the manga sphere.
Yeah, because the original Horimiya is actually called Hori-san to Miyamura-kun, which is Hori-san and Miyamura-kun, which, if you Google it, it was by Gagan Comics. That was from February 2007 to December 22nd, 2011, 10 volumes. And if I remember correctly, again, I've not read it, but to my knowledge, it's more like a 4-coma panel kind of situation there. And then it was adapted into an OVA series from September 2012 to May 2021.
Yep, again, with the OVA releases, DVDs coming out every other year.
Yeah, it's very sparse. And to my knowledge, there was a lot of fan input. Again, it's a little bit hazy, but I remember there was a lot of fan support and a lot of buying of their merchandise in order to keep that property flowing.
Yep. So it still retained the same name, Hori-san to Miyamura-kun. The list of studios is interesting. Gonzo, Hood's Entertainment, fuck them. We're still waiting for Drifters. What the fuck? Studio Kai and Marone. Fairly popular, 125,000 members. Raw score of 7.41, which puts it in the top 2,300. So
yeah. So here's the thing. Hood's Entertainment. Okay, so here's the thing. There's only 6 episodes.
Yeah.
Of 20-something minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Hood's Entertainment did episodes 1 and 2. Marone did episode 3. Gonzo did 4 and 5, and Studio Kai did 6. It's like the weirdest mishmash of one.
It's like a Animatrix kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like pass the baton, that
or
kind of
like
thing.
the Star Wars stories where they had, I think it was
Visions.
Saru also
yeah,
did
Star Wars
episodes.
Visions
Yeah.
is the one you're thinking about. The anthology series.
Yeah.
But talk about IP handovers. This is literal handovers to 4 different studios with different directors, different musicians, different producers. The only one that is actually consistent is written by the same person is Unico Ayana, basically. So the through line there. However, one thing I will say is nowadays you will probably not know of Hori-san to Miyamura-kun. You will know it as Horimiya, so it's kind of a rebranding, if you will. And then that series is written by Hiro and illustrated by Daisuke Hagiwara.
Now, what's interesting is the handover period. Now, you mentioned that Hori-san to Miyamura-kun, the original 4-coma style manga, more like a webcomic series, was running from 2007 through 2011, so December 2011. The Horimiya manga that we know of today actually ran from October 2011 through to March 2021. So it legitimately was going through a handover process of 2 months, wrapping up the original Hori-san to Miyamura-kun through to contemporary Horimiya from October 2011 to December 2011.
Yep, and obviously the Horimiya series that we all know and love in modern times in 2021 is done by Cloverworks, also with their sequel, The Missing Pieces, in essentially 2023.
Now, the interesting thing as well with this handover was not only, of course, we have Hiro, who's still very much front and center, but the original 4-coma webcomic series, both the story and the art was done by Hiro.
Yes.
The manga adaptation, the manga transfer to the contemporary version, not only do you have Hiro still, but he or she's only focusing on the story.
Mm-hmm.
You then have Daisuke Hagiwara, who now does the art. And when you look at the covers of both, they could not be any different.
It's so drastic. And I'm not trying to insult Hiro's art style. I can only say that...
You can tell it's a webcomic.
Yes. I'll just say that.
It's one, basically.
Yes. And I can clearly say that the illustration by Daisuke is very good.
Yeah,
and the aesthetic is carried over in the anime.
Is it a common thing as well within the webcomic sphere of not using real names but using pen names,
like pseudonyms?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess so.
You're trying to keep your identity a bit more under wraps.
Well, obviously, because let's say, I mean, this is speculation, right? But if you assume that like someone like your hero, for example, and you wrote a dud, then you can kind of change your pseudonym.
Probably actually.
Whereas if you use your real name, then it would be like, oh,
stuck.
So you're the one who wrote the shitty Horimiya adaptation, whatever, and then you would just be like, well, fuck, I can't get out of that typecasting.
Good thing it actually turned out pretty good for him.
Well, yeah, I mean that's good. Yeah. So, I mean, Horimiya literally changes hands, and I think in this case, for the better.
It's interesting as well because what we have is usually it's like you have in this instance, if it's a manga handover, it's like with One Punch Man, whip version to print version, and then from the print version you then get the anime adaptations. Whereas with Horimiya-san, Hori-san to Miyamura-kun and Horimiya, both of them have anime adaptations.
Yes,
which is completely wild.
Yeah,
right. Like,
and I don't think you can even get the Hori-san to Miyamura-kun anymore because it was like a DVD back in the day. So it's like really difficult to even get. So
such as like the mid 2000s.
Yeah, it's like
literally was the Wild Wild West of getting anime.
Like licensing hell or purgatory as we call it, right? So I mean that's just the way it goes. But I think everyone would really it's one of those things where it's like, oh, did you know that Horimiya wasn't originally Horimiya? You know, that kind of thing.
I always thought it was just the web series. I had no fucking clue that the original web series also had an OVA adaptation.
Yeah, I watched it. I watched like 2 episodes of it.
That is a crazy clusterfuck of handovers there.
It was super boring.
Oh, you okay, all right.
I read, I mean, it's just like, it doesn't have the same flair and chemistry.
Well, 4 comas are hard to do, right? Especially like if you're trying to create something that is legitimately like a school-based romance.
Mm-hmm.
Like 4 comas, I usually tie to being comedy.
Yeah,
right. And there's not
like slapstick.
There's not a whole lot of comedy in Horimiya. You have comedic moments.
Yes,
right.
But it's not a comedy.
The front and center is the relationship between
Hori-san and Miyamura. Yeah, and I just have to say that like. It's not necessarily due to the limit. I think it's just a limitation of resources because, to my knowledge, it was just they just wanted to make it happen. So then they gave it to whatever studio and whichever one wants to keep the dream alive until Hiro made the Horimiya that we all know in terms of the manga and anime form with Cloverworks.
Yeah. So. In terms of remakes, yes, there are a lot of remakes. We didn't even talk about the other ones like Shaman King, Urusei Yatsura, Rurouni Kenshin.
Mm-hmm.
Rama Half coming up soon as well. But yeah, like these things will happen very, very often because sometimes I think you need to understand that nostalgia plays a pretty big factor in a lot of fans of any entertainment medium. And I think we've all seen there's been a lot of remakes of loads of different properties, regardless of it being anime or manga, live action, novels, movies, stuff like that. They're happening. They're always going to happen. Not always for the good, but the ones we listed so far, hey, I don't think you're going to have any issue with those whatsoever.
Now, we are going to have to transition to the sad, unfortunate facet of IP handovers, and that's when death and injury of creators or staff comes into effect. I also want to emphasize that we will not be talking about certain works where the creators are, let's say, are in prison. Let's just move that along. Yeah. Obviously, that happens due to various reasons. We have mentioned them before, whether it's in the iceberg or, throughout our news that we talk about. So we will just say that obviously that happens, and we will just move on from there. But death and injury of creators unfortunately are just the way things are given certain circumstances. I think the ones that really are that really rings true is Berserk, the thing that Will and I are quite fond of, and how it is kind of preserved due to, I guess, the assistant taking over now. Mm-hmm. I think is a double-edged sword, literally, and no pun intended, of carry on the legacy while also trying to maintain as much integrity of it as possible, right?
I think with this was, of course, like an unforeseen but also like unpreventable situation. You can never guarantee that everybody remains in good health, right? Like you can, bad relationships, you can always fix those, right? But if you are not in the best of shapes and you do end up actually having your health deteriorate, There's not much you can do to reverse it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that was also like kind of more heartbreaking was the fact that the creator was so passionate about Berserk, and I think that's like you mentioned, right? People don't love Berserk for Berserk. People love Berserk because of the creator and like the story that they fostered, the community they built. Because look, no matter how many times they tried to destroy Berserk with all the anime adaptations,
yes,
you still have
the 3D anime adaptations, I might add,
and there's a new one coming out soon as well. Right? People still love Berserk. And I think in this case, with the creator passing away and the assistant taking up the realms, I think that transition, that handover, it's more symbolic than anything.
Yeah, and it's also a wild story because, to my knowledge, and I might be wrong, but I'm just going off of my memory here, the publisher and the assistant were just going to call it quits, being like, hey, we respect, is it Kentaro, right?
Yeah.
Sensei's
Miura.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they were like, hey, we respect Sensei. We're just going to let it like be, let it lie. And I think the assistant cleaning up his studio found a letter or something and then being like, yo, you need to continue on. Here is some bullet points or something. And then they talk it to the publisher and then they decide to still continue. I think that is roughly what happened. I might be misconstruing things, and if I am, I apologize. But it is, like, as you said, Will, a carrying off the legacy and spirit, the IP handover. And I think this is, like, the most good ending possible given the circumstances.
To give, like, a summation of how it all came down, essentially, I mean, of course, we can say, like, letters, memorandums, and whatnot. But Morty, who was the assistant, commented in an interview in 2023 saying that Miura is just a fucking manga genius.
Well, yeah, he is.
Loads and loads of talent. But most importantly, and quote, he had an eagerness to see things through to the end as well as an outstanding ability to paint, conceive stories, and employ narrative devices effectively. So he included that initially it was going to be impossible to do this without Miura. But then after speaking with members of Studio Gaga who worked under Miura, he decided, you know what, let's carry on their legacy. And in quote, the thought of Miura would be mad at me doing nothing motivated me to reach a decision. Such as the influence of Kentaro Miura that even through death, they still look to him and be like, give me guidance. And they just remember anecdotes. They remember moments they have with him. And just inferring from his personality, if I was to lay low and leave this to lie dormant out of respect,
it cannot be.
Miura would find that as disrespect.
Yeah. It's such a poetic, it reminds me of that Haikyuu thing of like the coach in season 3 and his last line was about like, in volleyball you look up. And that was his last voice line before he passed away. It was just like, holy shit. Like, the amount of weight that carries with it. And it's just like, brings like a tear to my eye. I get like warm, fuzzy feelings because it's just like magical, right?
Yeah.
And going off of that, I mean, there are other instances in which, like, for example, LasTame, which is, I think, From Villainous to Savior, which has an anime adaptation. And I think the light novel is still continuing. But the manga series, the one that I read, is stopped at like, early on, like I think volume 3 or 4 because of the artist's death. And in respect, they're trying to figure it out, but at the moment it is kind of canceled. Obviously the light novel is going to continue. And I think on another note, a more hyped series nowadays from the Manhwa side is Solo Leveling. And I think, Will, you would have a lot to say about that, right?
Yeah. So Solo Leveling had been running for a long time. And when I say long time, I mean really it only started like back in 2016, but it's still going. At least that was the original web novel. Then you had the webtoon, which is then readapted, but also released new stuff as of 2019 through to 2024. Midway through, though, the artist Dubu unfortunately passed away. They decided that they were going to continue, though, and then they would bring back, of course, Chugong, who was the original writer, and they're going to bring in a new art team to compose the art. So this is an instance of just carrying on the business.
Yeah.
It's not cold-blooded. It's not like, well, fuck this guy. We're gonna continue working. No, I think like they paid the respects, but it's also like there also are other people involved in this, and therefore, like, would it be a disservice to the fans if they were to completely stop this simply because they want to do it out of respect for somebody passing away? People would have understood. People would have completely respected their decision to put it on ice and wait for a decision. But I think they kind of went quite smoothly into it. The fact that like even after Dubu, like full name of Jang Sung Rak, who passed away in 2022, since then they were still released. They released 5 more volumes afterwards.
Yeah, and going off of that, I mean, earlier we mentioned about Hunter x Hunter. And the author, I mean, at one point, I don't know if we talked about it, Will, on like our old school news section, but the author got a representative on like a morning show to make a statement and reading from his words, being like, look, if anything happens to me, I have multiple endings in mind. Look, I'm trying to figure it out. Guys, support me and everything. Like, I'm trying my best. And I'm just like, bro, it's like the hardest thing to like listen and hear and like feel, like, because I don't know how it feels when you lose.
I think this is an instance that's different from the others because it's not so much a handover of works, a handover of ideas, or a handover of art. This is in defiance of a handover.
Exactly.
The author does not want to let anybody touch his works, but he is also completely understanding of a situation that it would actually hamper his ability to continue the story. So, call it the right or wrong decision, he made a choice to at least let his fans know, if something were to happen to me today, there are several endings that this can go. I will present one of them to you.
Yeah, and I think the other ones will be released as the situation unfolds over time. I'll try my best, and then he goes in and out of retirement, I think the 3rd time now, right?
Yeah.
So, look, I wish them the best, and hopefully the story will be finished, because at the end of the day, Hunter x Hunter is one of those manga series and anime series that will stand the test of time and is like one of the old classics of anime as a whole. But let's go from one anime classic to another anime classic of the original big 3. What happens when the original creator of a certain shonen series, let's say Naruto, decides to be like, yo, I'm done, but I think the story is not done. So what do? You're going to hand it off to your assistant. And the assistant is like, well, what if I just make Boruto? And that is another IP handover of sorts, because you're essentially giving the keys to your assistant or to a successor or protege to carry on that legacy. And whether or not you like Boruto, what's it called? Boruto The Next Generations, I think it's called.
Yep.
I have like thoughts, because I definitely have a soft spot for Naruto, and I think a lot of people do. But when Boruto came around, I think I was hyped in the beginning, like when Boruto was first announced. And then it just kind of fizzled out to me.
It's hard. Look, to sort of give some background information, if you guys don't know enough about Naruto already, it originally came out in 1999. This is the manga, and ran for 15 years until 2014, right? Written and drawn by Masashi Kishimoto. So imagine this. 15 years of writing one of the most highly rated, most hyped manga series of all time. Yes, the scores kind of tell a different story. 8.07, ranking it at a 621 with membership of 420,000, but popularity-wise, 12th.
Right. And you also have to go into like video games. You also have to go into so much of identity of anime stems from, in part, Naruto.
Yeah. The fact that with Boruto having run for 7 years, actually did finish. It finished last year in April 2023.
I didn't even know that until I researched it. Yeah.
7-year run, right? 20 volumes. Naruto had 72.
Yeah. And tons of movies and tons of stuff.
So many movies. Granted, all the movies were kind of, but
I think there was only the one that was important.
Yeah, the one where...
The epilogue one, let's just say.
The one where Naruto, gets married to Hinata.
Yeah. Hey, spoiler alert, you should have known better, okay? You should have known that would happen.
There was something that definitely caught his eye.
Yeah.
Some things. So you can imagine that, right? You've built such a long legacy, 700 chapters of manga, right? And then you also had several hundred episodes, not just from Naruto, but also into Shippuden with the countless movies they have as well.
So by the way, back then when Naruto ended, I panicked. Obviously, Shippuden would happen straight after, but there was like a brief moment that young Jason was like, "Why would you do that to me?"
I think it was also because a lot of the stuff that was leading up to the end of original Naruto was just like filler. Like, dude, they had like several hundred episodes of filler.
Yeah, and obviously Shippuden is when the time skip happens, right? So, and to be fair, I thought when I saw the time skip, I was like, "Fuck yeah!" But at the time, you have to understand that like little young Jason was like, "How could you end it at like Sasuke and Naruto having this fight and then that's it?" I'm like, "How is that possible? Like that's bullshit." And then I wouldn't even call it an IP handover because it was just. But would you call it like a sequel of sorts?
It is a sequel.
I mean, so they call it a different thing. They call it Shippuden. But then whenever I say Naruto, I generally mean both.
Yeah.
Right?
Whenever you say Naruto as like a whole, you are talking about both Naruto and Naruto Shippuden. But of course, with the hardcore fans, you will of course then sort of like determine, okay, this was Naruto, that's Shippuden, because a lot of the major story arcs happened in Shippuden.
Yes.
Right? The more sort of like dark seinen-esque kind of stuff happened in Shippuden, and Naruto was just a massive tournament arc.
Yeah, because they're kids.
Yeah.
Before they were young adults, right?
Yeah. So I think like it is definitely a sequel of sorts, right? Like the fact that like original Naruto ended February 8th, 2007. You only needed to wait 1 week for Naruto Shippuden because that one came out February 15th, 2007.
Yeah. But that 1 week was a identity crisis for young Jason.
Yeah. It was a weird time for anime because the fact that like you did not know if this arc was in the manga because look, if you're watching anime, chances are you're not reading the manga.
Yeah.
Right? So you would not know like if this is filler or not.
Yeah. Or if you're watching it now, it's all already done, so you would know that there are more episodes to watch,
and
right?
You know like where to search for, how much of this is filler. Okay, skip these episodes, but watch half of this episode because the second half is going to lead into the story.
Yeah. But back then, no. You just had to watch it and see how it goes, or read it and then see how it goes. So it was very perplexing for me when I first encountered the gulf, even though it was a week from Naruto to Naruto Shippuden. But
yeah. So Naruto, the original manga, ended in 2014. Shortly afterwards, well, okay, not shortly, 2016, Boruto, Naruto Next Generations. Now, this is where, of course, like this is where people get a little bit confused. Because it wasn't called The Next Generations, it was Boruto Naruto Next Generations. It's actually on the cover of their manga.
Oh.
So
even I made that mistake.
So,
damn.
Yeah, not TNG, it's NNG. So that's the thing. No matter what, when you say you like Boruto, you cannot remove Boruto from the shadows of Naruto.
Right.
And call it a handover, it very much is because it's a different creator.
The assistant, to be precise.
I mean, you still had like Kishimoto doing some of the story too.
Yeah.
But like the art's different. You had like a whole cast of people supporting this. But again, it's like drinking Coke and Diet Coke. Like the difference, and one's better than the other.
I just don't look. I mean, if I was in that situation, obviously I'm not. But if I was, I would probably take the bag and make Boruto, right? But on the other hand,
look at it this way: the raw score is a 6.81.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
The popularity is 106.
Yeah, I mean because of the legacy.
That's the thing. Do they like it because it's Boruto, or do they like it because it's just more Naruto in a different light?
And I would argue, as the creator of Boruto, what would be your next work? Would people even give you a shot? Because then you would be known as the assistant who made Boruto and helped with Naruto. How could you let go of that kind of identity? It's really difficult. I mean, it's like Oda being like, "Oh, I'm going to work on Two Piece."
I think after One Piece,
it's not going to happen, right? It's not. No. He's not. He's just going to call it quits afterwards. He's just going to retire. But yeah, it's like, how can you do that when that's all you're known for? Araki doing non-JoJo stuff. Can you even imagine that scenario?
Yeah,
that's just weird. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying I won't read it, but it's weird.
And you also want to think that like people have the freedom of choice to do whatever they want, right? And it has happened.
Yes, it
right?
does.
I mean, like,
but the Fullmetal Alchemist person.
Look at Bleach and Burn the Witch.
Yeah, but Burn the Witch kind of burned.
You know what I mean?
Fizzled
they
out.
at least had the choice to do it. It's just people did not like it.
I liked it, but personally, but yeah, I mean,
right? I
yeah.
mean, fucking Tokyo Ghoul and Children X.
Yeah, same thing. So it's tough to break yourself from that, such that if you were to, even hand over your IP to someone else in good hands, and you decide to go off of doing your own thing. I think the Fullmetal Alchemist mangaka, I think she worked on Shadows of the Demons or something as her next piece of work. And to my knowledge, it is not even nowhere clear as popular as Fullmetal Alchemist. And I think the Naruto original mangaka did Samurai something, like Seventh Samurai or something.
I've heard of that, yeah.
And I think the reason that you and I cannot even remember or recall the actual title tells you about how relevant or popular that series was.
It's really hard to be able to break out of your own legacy. You've been look, it's the same. Not just in like anime and manga, but like in terms of TV series, when you have like a long running series and then you have a spin-off, right? Not everybody's going to be Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, right? That legacy itself, everybody fucking loves. But then whenever you have a spin-off series of something, it's not always going to pan out. And then when you spend so much time building your career on one character or one movie or one series, and then you move on to another thing, people will always remember you as that guy or this guy or that kind of character or that kind of character. Not everybody's gonna be like an Aka Akasaka, where you can break out of just doing Kaguya-sama
and do Oshinoko.
Yeah.
Or I'm not even gonna do the art. I'm just gonna write Oshinoko and be a boss about it.
Yeah.
So who is the boss and the MVP of IP handovers? You would have remembered, because Will and I mentioned the name of this animation studio several times in the first half and partially in this second half as well. Due to my research, I have uncovered Studio Deen is unfortunately the MVP of IP handovers. For one reason or the other, Studio Deen is the studio that handles handovers extremely poorly. And also in both directions. So, Fate Stay Night given to Ufotable. That's good. Then
it's bad for Studio Deen.
Yes,
because it was very clear 2006 was not their year.
Yeah, I mean, when you kill people, they die. That's a very enlightening thought, Studio Deen. Thank you.
They did take over a few things that should have been more popular, though.
Like Seven Deadly Sins, Log Horizon. I mean, all those were kind of fell flat. And then you get the more neutral examples, like Hozoki Cool's Headedness Season 2, which I think was relatively okay in terms of a transition. But Studio Deen has their fingers in a lot of pies in terms of whether they were the original IP holders giving it to someone else or taking over IPs. And I think nowadays, anything Studio Deen, unfortunately, has like this mark that I just don't appreciate.
What, really? Even... You think all of them though? Like even,
no, not all of them, obviously.
I mean, like for example, Konosuba is still fine.
Yeah,
I think it's just what we're more specifically talking about is like the mid 2000s and early 2010s of Studio Deen.
Yes,
and I think the main issue that we have with Studio Deen is not the fact that they do everything. It's the fact that like if you're gonna do everything, at least put up like a concerted effort in all of them. But when you're doing like historical fantasies, you're doing drama romances, you're doing comedies, you're doing action adventures, you're doing BL, you're doing GL, you're doing like legitimately every single genre tag under the sun, you're stretching yourself thin and you're going to be open to criticism based on whichever fan base you're targeting.
I think I would change a little bit of what you said is that Studio Deen does not have to do everything. I would change it to but Studio Deen wants to do anything.
Like, look at it this way. Hozoki's Cool-Headedness.
Sure.
Okay. Konosuba.
Fine. That was okay.
Rurouni Kenshin.
Yeah.
Showa Kurakukushin. Right? Sasaki to Miyano. They also did Initial D.
Yeah.
Like, they've done Sailor Moon Crystal. They've done Rama Half. They've done a lot of BLs, actually.
I just feel that, like, in my research on, like, these handovers and transfers, Studio Deen was the name that keeps popping up, is essentially what I'm trying to sort of say with this.
They did original Urusei Yatsura with Studio Pierrot all the way back in 1981.
There you go. Right? So they are, in terms of handovers, the MVP of it, for better or for worse, right?
Because they've just been involved in everything.
Yeah, and their history, their legacy has been so long, so you're bound to get a lot of these situations. So it's not necessarily I'm like spotlighting on them to kind of point fingers at Studio Deen and like say you're shit. No, but they are involved in a lot of these transactions, right?
Yeah. And I mean, they're still doing fine. Excuse me. They're still doing fine. Like some of the worst they've done, like for example, they did Tassogare Out of Focus, they did Remonster, they did Tadama Okaeri. One of the more recent ones, I think that just came out.
Well, Remonster was
that one's Days of My Stepsister. That one's doing okay.
I think the Out of Focus one was that BL show, right?
Yeah. Tadaima Okaeri 7.78. That one came out earlier this year in spring.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still doing good work. I think it's just the fact that because you see the name pop up so often attached to different properties, that based on how well or how bad something's done, you get such contrasting, bipolar, opposite spectrum kind of, agreements, disagreements. It's so hard to kind of define what Studio Deen is, right? Like when you talk about A1 Pictures, Cloverworks, Bridge, ACGT, you talk about did I say A1 yet? Yes, A1.
Yeah.
Or Wit Studio or UFO Table, you kind of have an idea of what their style is. Even like mega monoliths like Mappa, you know what their style is. I don't know what Studio Deen's style is, except that they do everything.
Yeah. I mean, when or like there's no flair that kind of goes with it, right? Whether it is the choice of properties or a stylistic choice.
Do you know what, for me, and I know I'm going to piss off a lot of people saying this.
Let's hear it.
They are the Cheesecake Factory of anime studios.
Oof.
Because I think they're okay. They do a lot of really bad things, but have you ever looked at a menu at Cheesecake Factory? It's like 15 pages. They do Chinese, they do Japanese, they do pizza, they do pasta, they do cheesecakes, they do donuts, they do everything. But not everything is good. Their cheesecakes are great. Right? The cheesecake is Konosuba.
I actually quite like that analogy,
The cheesecake is Konosuba.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But their pasta is fucking...
Fate Stay Night.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I love that analogy, actually. So, look, Studio Deen, for better or for worse, you're number one on the podium. But let's talk about an up-and-coming studio that may or may not be doing too good. And I'm talking about Oshinoko's animation studio, Doga Kobo. So there has been news since, let's see, it is July 11th, right?
So about 2 months ago.
Yeah. Kadokawa has acquired Doga Kobo as part of their, acquisition. And when I heard that, part of me gets quite worried. And why do I think that is worrying? Is because when you look at Doga Kobo's kind of lineup, right? You would think of Oshinoko, you would think of My Senpai's Annoying, a bit more like riskier but more artistic kind of style and properties. Kadokawa, now having Doga Kobo, also has Studio Engai, Studio Kadan, Raging Bull, and the newly formed Bellnox Films, and also affiliate company Kinema Citrus. And they have said on record, according to Anime News Network, that they're just going to go work as part of like their Kadokawa's IPs, which, if you know, a lot of light novels are going to be adapted, and I feel like that may or may not be the best thing for Doga Kobo, who has kind of out of nowhere just jumped into everyone's MVP list due to Oshinoko, and for good reason too.
I mean, you also have to just go 2 months back with the acquisition of Science Saru by Toho.
Yeah, exactly. And then now they're doing Dandadan, which, to be fair, I think they are a great fit for it. But at the same time, it's like, it's kind of curious, right? Because all of a sudden now, what is Science Saru going to do long term?
Are you going to see Super Shiro and Devilman Crybaby? Are you going to see Japan Sinks? Haikyuu Monogatari? Are you going to see Keep Your Hands Off Isekan? Are you going to see Space Dandy?
Or are you going to see
Ping Pong
Scott
Animation?
Yeah, or are you going to see Scott Pilgrim? Or are you going to see like Cass Hearn?
I'm just looking at this. There is a tentative Ghost in the Shell by Science Saru for 2026.
Yeah.
That's not what you would expect Science Saru to do. Like,
yes.
Okay, granted, Dan, major fucking shonen series through Jump.
Yes.
You know it's going to be a banger, and I'm like surprised, but also kind of happy.
And the trailer looks bombastic as fuck. I'm so ready for it.
Is this like a new dawn for Science Saru? Where, let's not forget, before Tatami Time Machine Blues, they did the travesty that was Yurei Deco.
Yes.
Right? So,
yes.
And as ambitious or as, like, artistic Haikyuu Monogatari
with
was.
Yoko Yamada from KyoAni.
It was boring. I'm sorry.
Yes.
It was pretty boring.
I mean, I think artistically it looked good. Yoko Yamada.
Yeah, she did work.
But also, by the way, she didn't really leave. I think she went off to do her own thing from KyoAni, which is all big deal. So it's like, when you get acquired, immediately your direction changes. And that changes maybe Oshinoko Season 3, for example.
Yeah, I mean, what's on the slate for Doga Kobo coming forward? Is it like beyond Oshinoko? They've done the Russian thing.
Yes, the Aya, right?
Aya sometimes hides her feelings in
Russian. Yep, which is doing pretty good right now.
Yeah, in a question mark release, speculated to be airing in 2025. They're doing Shinji Ke no Kodomo Tachi. No idea what the fuck that is. If you look at the manga source, it is a 6.06.
Is it done by Kadokawa?
No, it's done by Young Animal, or at least it's serialized in Young Animal. Is Young Animal under Kadokawa?
Well, let's do a live investigation.
Young Animal magazine. Oh, interesting.
What?
It's a semi-monthly Japanese seinen manga magazine that features photos of gravure models.
Okay, let's move on now.
It's been published by Hakusensha.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
That's the research we needed.
That's the research we needed. Also, let's talk about Studio 3 Hertz. I think if you were to listen to our BP30, you might have heard me kind of allude to the fact that Studio 3 Hertz was dissolved, and we are now going to talk a little bit about it. Essentially, due to bankruptcies, Studio 3 Hertz had to sell off their franchises, and probably the one that is of importance in terms of the most probably relevant right now would be Gun Gale Online Season 2. And that is actually just a very clear-cut example of earlier when we say IP handovers are done through insolvency or bankruptcy.
Yeah. So, I mean, go on. It sucks to hear about the situation with Studio 3 Hertz, but as we mentioned, right, these things are going to happen.
Right.
It's not to say that, like, oh, maybe 3 Hertz shouldn't have done so many originals. Maybe they should have been doing things more profitably. But at that point, right, like when you start talking about doing things for the sake of making money, is it so bad to say that, like, I want to create something that is original? I want to create something that is not within, like, the mainstream. And it's a very hard thing to balance because you're right. We had that conversation with Vishal not too long ago, talking about how, like, people get into the industry and thinking about you don't need to make money. Well, you're, tough shit, dude. Like, you need money
in order to keep going. Yeah. I mean, going off of that, which studio is recently well known for kind of selling off their IP rights or their licensing rights as an animation studio? Yep. The Vinland Saga and AOT was given to MAPPA. Ancient Magus' Bride was given to Studio Kafka. And Hazuki's Cool Headedness was given to Studio Deen. So these things happen all the time. And whether we like it or not, we have no say. All we can say is we just hope that things turn out, for the better. So I think Will and I kind of spit fire and wax lyrical about all these IP handovers. And I think we'll just end maybe in like the next 5 to 10 minutes, but going off of in a summary format, some good, mid, normal, and bad handovers, right?
And this is obviously like a very simplified question to a really big question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is the studio for a anime series for you?
So me personally, right? Unfortunately, I have to give a cop-out answer and say it actually depends on the studio. And I'll explain why. For example, if you give something to KyoAni, immediately it is of a certain artistic style, as a certain vibe, right? And then if you were to give that away to someone else, it will not be the same anime adaptation that I would appreciate.
Okay, let me rephrase the question. How important is the studio being a match for the type of property they're going to do?
Out of 10 or
out of 10?
I would say 8.
8. Pretty important.
I would say it's extremely important.
Because you've seen, for example, if you're going to be doing a massive shonen action with comedy, you make sure that all 3 are done well and not just have one that can do the comedy really well in JC Staff.
Yeah. And I would also argue that I'm not giving it 10 out of 10 because there are always exceptions to the rules, such as like Akudama Drive with Studio Piero, or like, Fieren with Madhouse,
Passione with,
Yeah, with Spice and Wolf. And even I would argue the Passion of Spice and Wolf is above average, but not like pinnacle, basically. But still a good adaptation.
Are those anomalies though, or are we just
Yes.
Like overlooking the potential of a studio?
No, I just think that there are anomalies such that I cannot give it a 10 out of 10 in terms of importance of animation studios.
Yeah, it is hard to see, of course, that like Passione would do a good job.
I mean, we're talking about JC Staff that we shit on all the time for One Punch Man, but in the same breath, they did Scientific Railgun and it's firing off all cylinders. Studio Deen is the same thing. They would have random bangers here and there. So it's hard for me to sort of say, oh, animation studios are irrelevant towards the quality.
But it would be naive of us to argue against fans in general having an affinity to certain studios.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to tell you that Tezuka production,
let's say like the upcoming season or movie of Demon Slayer is not going to be done by Ufotable.
Sacrilegious.
It's going to be done by Mappa.
More acceptable, but still sacrilegious.
Like you would see again the fallout and the potential debacle that happened on Twitter.
I mean, with Studio to Mappa, or in this case, Ufotable to Mappa, is acceptable to me in terms of like, okay, at least I know they're in good hands and pedigree.
But you wouldn't be surprised if some people were very vocal about their disapproval.
Absolutely,
yeah.
I would expect it. Period. Of course, I don't hope for it, but it's just going to happen.
Yeah.
But okay, so do we want to go over examples? I think we pretty much said a lot of good, mid, bad examples. And there was plenty more that we could have talked about, but I think we're running a bit over, and we're kind of beating a dead horse in terms of having that kind of same narrative to go through. But I think I'll just summarize by saying that handoffs and handovers are more common than you might think, and that animation studios have no say whatsoever. Usually it's the production committee or the publisher or the creator's decision, or like a mixture of them.
To round this off, what would you say is an example of like the best example of a good handover? In my opinion, like the easiest answer is Fate Stay Night. The Fate series in general, moving hands from Studio Deen to Ufotable.
Yeah, I think that's a very obvious one, especially when you see Season 1 and Season 2, the contrast.
Is there any worse handover than One Punch Man from Studio Madhouse to JC Staff?
Maybe Seven Deadly Sins?
Devil's a part-timer.
Devil's a part-timer. I would say Seven Deadly Sins Season 3
to be fair,
especially egregious.
I think that with One Punch Man, despite the vitriol that people had for JC Staff, it still ranks fairly well. And people still are on it. Whereas with Seven Deadly Sins, as soon as it moved from A1 to Studio Deen, the amount of memes in terms of how bad the animation quality was and the character designs, I think that one probably takes the cake.
Yeah, and I think the one that gives me the most curiosity is the One Piece remake from Toei Animation to its studio, because we literally know nothing.
I'm actually interested to hear your thoughts on why you thought Ancient Magus' Bride's handover from Wit Studio to Studio Kafka would be deemed a bad handover.
Oh, I just thought it was a mid handover.
So
Because
it wasn't bad. It was just the fact that you went from such a high bar to now something that's a bit more on like the middling success.
Yeah, I mean, I still like season 2, Ancient Magus' Bride, but it doesn't have the same production quality and music.
It's so hard to look past Wit, especially like peak Wit Studio.
And that's why I give it a pass. Because I think, like, hey, at least they're telling the story and they're not shitting on it or
they're not
like
reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
They're not trying to fuck things up.
And for better or for worse, Studio Kafka is just not Wit Studio's level of quality and experience. So why should I expect them to be able to pull that off?
Whereas,
I'm
like,
already
yeah.
glad that they didn't pull it off in a negative way.
Whereas, like, when you talk Seven Deadly Sins, A1 Pictures, great studio. Studio Deen, done a lot of shit, but, like, holy fuck, like, how'd you manage to mess this up?
Even really good series like Haikyuu to the top, if you were to, like, freeze frame certain places, the animation is horrendous. If you look at JJK with Mappa, there was, like, a couple of episodes where I think episode 14 in season 2 especially was known for really big dip in quality because, like, 30% of it was done, which we will talk about at a future episode. But it's just like, that's just the way it goes.
I mean, let's look at it this way. Studio Deen's not doing 780 Sins anymore.
Yeah.
It's been handed over to Telecom Animation Film. So, yeah, the latest season that ran from October 2023, so fall 2023 through to March 2024, no more Studio Deen. And guess what? The score went up immediately.
Yeah. Look, more often than not, when it comes down to maintaining the same level of quality from previous iterations, it is the staff, to me, that's more important than the animation studio themselves. Because we've seen that with One Punch Man Season 1 and 2. We have seen that with a lot with Psycho Pass, where technically most of the staff is the same, except the creator for an anime original. So, to answer your question, anime studios obviously, in my mind, play a huge role in terms of what I expect, but that obviously doesn't always guarantee.
Yeah. I think because most of the time, the studios, you kind of know their animation style. You kind of know which directors or which staff they're going to bring onto the project, and you kind of have an idea of what voice cast you're going to employ.
Yeah, and I think towards the end of the day, production committees sometimes don't care if your quality is not good. They just care if it earns money and it keeps the property in the zeitgeist and keeps it going.
Yeah, but at least you should also assume that they're fully aware that they can't push out a bad product. That they need to at least make something good out of it.
I mean, that's why video game developers, when like they publish a game and it comes out and they got shit reviews, I'm very sure that a lot of them internally knows all that it would be that way.
Yeah.
Because they're fully aware of that, but they just had to do it due to circumstances. And I think that pretty much wraps up what I think of IP handovers for the time being. What about you, Will?
Yeah, I think in terms of like the importance of a studio, I would probably put it. I'd give it a 9.
Yeah,
actually,
Mm-hmm.
I understand that you're going to have those one-offs of a PRO dropping a fucking bomb that is Akudama Drive,
like mwah, right? Yeah.
Right? But again, like you can't ignore the fact that they've also made some pretty big duds in a lot of the big productions they've had too. So
I mean, my cat is depressed again today, right?
the Masterful Cat, yeah.
Gohan's. What else is Gohan's known for that is like good?
Yeah.
Handshakers? Hell no. So exceptions can happen. Essentially, is what I say.
Yeah, and like let's not talk about Tokyo Ghoul.
But let's talk about you thanking. No, sorry. Let's talk about us thanking you for listening to this episode of the Good Anime Palette Podcast. If you want to, we greatly appreciate you leaving a ratings or review on your podcast platform of choice. If you want to contact us, you can reach us through our email, gapalette@gmail.com, GAPALETTE, all lowercase, all one word, using the handle @PaletteGood, capital P and capital G, all one word. We have a Discord server invite link in the show description. We have a website, www.goodanimepalette.com, all lowercase, all one word. Music credits for this episode. Our intro music is Married to the Light by Omie. Our break music is Green Summer Ways by Kyo. And our outro music is Weeping by Cushy. If you want to, we can support the music artists that we feature by listening to them on Spotify, Apple Music, or your music listening platform choice. And Epidemic Sound provides all of our royalty-free music. If you're interested, you can sign up using the referral link in our show description. Terms and conditions apply.
Man, I actually had to look up what happened with the Tokyo Ghoul exhibition because they had that sort of special event.
Oh yeah, that
2 months
10th
ago.
anniversary thing.
Yeah, nothing happened. They had 2 exhibitions in Tokyo and Osaka. They did some interactive exhibits, which is like the expectations versus reality thing, where people are like, "Oh, I can't wait to see what they're going to do next." And it turns out the biggest thing they're saying is no reboot, but you can watch all the anime free on YouTube.
I'm so sad, bro.
It sucks to be a Tokyo Ghoul fan, man.
That's the trials and tribulations and the ebb and flow of how it goes.
Yeah.
I think on that note, this is me signing off.
Yeah, I'm gonna go cry in a corner now.
See ya.